It's really great to see everyone. Good evening, dear Sangha. I know a lot of you, but for those I don't know, my name is Mina Gold, and I'm a longtime member of San Francisco Insight. I think I first started sitting with Eugene in 2007, long time. And I'm delighted to be here this evening with my colleagues and co-facilitators and mentors, friends from the Grip Training Institute, Bernard Moss, and Tommy Shakur Ross. All right, welcome Shakur, welcome Bernard. I'm so happy that you're here. And welcome to everybody. I'm so happy that you're here, truly. So I'm going to kick off the evening and give a little introduction to what is GRIP. And then I'll pass the mic to Bernard. And then Bernard will pass the mic to Shakur. And they'll, I don't know, they'll delight us with something. And then after that, we'll have a little guided sit, some announcements, and I hope plenty of time for questions and conversation. So GRIP is an acronym for Guiding Rage into Power. And it's a restorative justice-based healing and accountability program that's currently being offered in 7 California prisons. It's a year-long program. And when our participants are accepted into the program, we embark on a very courageous journey together, delving, excavating into our histories, childhoods, and bringing forward traumas, often that have never been spoken about sometimes, or never had the chance to be digested. We process unfinished business and really step out of shame and secrecy and hiding and into truth and vulnerability and accountability. So it's no small thing for the participants to get into the program. And just to give a sense of that, we are about to do interviews for our next cycle at San Quentin, where we're going to have 3 groups, which we call tribes. And I'll say something about why that word. So each group has 35 people. And right now we have a waiting list at San Quentin to interview. We're going to interview 500 people for those spots of just over 100. And that doesn't, and a lot of those people have been on the waiting list for years. And that doesn't include folks who want to be on the waiting list, and there's not the space for that now, which is very unfortunate. So why are the groups called tribes? It's because we really show up for each other like that. The whole process is done in a circle. So everyone can be seen and everyone can see each other. We behold each other, we hold each other as we go through this process, which can be difficult, frightening, beautiful, joyful, all of it. And each tribe gets their own specific name, which is a number. And that number comes, it's a process where we name the tribe, and the number comes from the number of cumulative years in that room of incarceration. So last cycle at San Quentin, for example, I sat with 2 tribes. One was tribe 773, 773 years of incarceration represented in that room of 35-ish people. And the other tribe was tribe 766, 766 years. Let's give you a moment to take that in. The whole curriculum is guided by 4 principles, which I'll just name quickly. The principles are stopping my violence, cultivating mindfulness, developing emotional intelligence, and understanding victim and survivor impact. And the whole process is held with the understanding or belief that hurt people, and healed people, heal people. So a few months ago, I was standing in the parking lot, San Quentin, with Jacques Verduin, who's the founder of GRIP. And we had just finished our Friday class, and we were looking at the prison, which can be seen from the parking lot. And he said, you know, the walls around this prison do a really great job of keeping people on the inside from getting out and keeping people on the outside from getting in. And that really struck me when he said that. And that is a bit of my motivation for hosting this evening here with all of you, is even if it's very minuscule way, to begin to soften that line of separation. And one of the things that has been said to me repeatedly inside from the guys inside is something like, you know, tell people about us. Tell people what it's like in here. Tell people what we're living through. Or tell people not to forget about us. Or thank you so much for coming in. Thank you for not forgetting about us. So here we are here in this Dharma setting. And I'm looking around the room and I'm guessing that many, if not all of us here, sitting here, have come to this practice because something hurts inside, or some stress or difficulty, some kind of wish to feel better, to have access to more joy or love or happiness. And that's the same thing that's happening in the grip circles. And even if we may not be using Dharma jargon in the grip circle, it's the same thing. In the curriculum someplace, it says, leaving prison before you get out. So it's cultivating this capacity for freedom, regardless of the external circumstances. Like, how can I inhabit freedom here and now? And I certainly yearn for that myself. And I'm guessing a lot of you do too. And so Bernard and Shakur are total bodhisattvas. And I'm sure they're like, probably never use that word to describe themselves, but they are people who are devoted to being peacemakers, being of service, devoted to the upliftment and freedom of others. And I have 2 brief anecdotes to prove that, and then I'm passing the mic and they're taken over. Okay, so my anecdote about Bernard, who I've had the pleasure of going inside San Quentin every Wednesday for over 1.5 years. And he is a bit of a rock star as we walk through the yard, and people are approaching him and asking advice or counsel. He's always willing, always offers his time. And one day we were walking through and someone from about maybe 20 feet away yelled, "Moss, you still here?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm going to keep coming in until all of you are free." And that's what he embodies. Thank you, Bernard. And now it's your turn, Shakur. I'm looking at you. So I met Shakur inside my first tribe, 773, Hua. And he is a facilitator, and it was maybe the first or second class. And I wanted to say something, and I was, I think, a bit tentative, but I went for it. I raised my hand a bit shyly, and Shakur saw that right away and turned toward me and gave me the floor. And was so welcoming and generous the way you did that, Shakur. You probably don't even remember this. And then when we were walking out that night across the yard, you said, you know, Nina, we really want to hear what you have to say. And you have no idea, Shakur, how healing that was for me, given my family of origin and my core wounds. And I really felt it from you. And that's what we're doing in these group tribes, is really seeing each other and welcoming each other home to our best selves, to our authentic selves. So thank you both so much. I have so much love for both of you, and I'm like exuberant that you're here. So passing the mic now to Bernard.
Okay, thank you, Nina. Appreciate that. So first of all, hello, everybody, and thank you for just hosting us tonight. I want to thank the San Francisco Insight Dharma Center for allowing us to share this space with you all tonight. So yeah, it's my pleasure to be here. I was told to take some time to kind of introduce myself and tell you a little bit about my background and what I do. So they gave me about 20 minutes, and I was telling them earlier, no one wants to hear me talk for 20 minutes. So I will try to kind of wrap this up a little bit and just give you a brief idea of who I am. But my name is Bernard Moss. I grew up here in the Bay Area. I moved to the city of Pittsburgh, California in 1968. Mother, father, my father went to prison when I was a very young man. He went to prison for bank robbery, and he was murdered in prison. He went to prison back in the South in Augusta, Georgia. And in those prisons, they had the Ku Klux Klan. And my father was put on the yard. He was a bit of a bully, and he was put on the yard by himself with Ku Klux Klan members who they killed him on the yard. They murdered him on the yard. So, I kind of grew up bitter and angry. Got to high school, and I had a lot of anger. And I didn't know how to process that anger. So I went into adulthood as an angry young man. At the age of 22, I shot a young man over a drug debt. It's probably the biggest mistake I ever made in my life. Fortunately, he survived and he lived, but I was convicted of premeditated attempted murder and sentenced to 7 years to life. At that time, I went ahead to prison. I was sent to Folsom State Prison near Sacramento. And I made a decision. At that time, they weren't letting people serving life in prison go. I figured this is where I was going to die. So I made a conscious decision to be the best convict that I can be. So that entailed getting into as much trouble as I can get into, raising as much hell as I can raise, wreaking as much havoc as I could wreak, and just being a prisoner and a convict. I traveled around the state from Folsom to Lancaster to Ione to CMC. I made the rounds. I hit a few different prisons. And in 2002, I received the blessing of transferring to San Quentin State Prison. I didn't want to go. I knew nothing about San Quentin State Prison, but I knew I didn't want to be there. A lot of guys was telling me I was crazy for not wanting to go. And so I kind of strapped up my boots and said, let's go try San Quentin. So I got there and I wasn't there maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And opening came up in a class that was going on called Catargio. And I found out that Catargio in Greek stood for putting away the things which bind you. And Jacques Verduin ran Catargio at the time. So I met Jacques in 2002 and he accepted me into his class and I didn't buy in. I was like, this is a lot of silliness, this mindfulness and this meditation and it's like this is not for me. But it was an opportunity for me to get out of my cell once a week and I didn't have to out count. So I showed up every single week. Uh, I was still getting in trouble. My experience in prison, I broke if there was a rule to be broken in prison, I believe I broke it. I was a drug dealer in prison. I drank alcohol in prison. I did it all. I stayed high in prison, and yeah, I went to the hole numerous times. And those who don't know what the hole is, ADSEG, or the hole is uh, uh, administrative segregation, when you're locked away from the rest of the population within the prison and you're in a cell by yourself. And I was always there. But every time I was released and let back out, Jacques always had space for me in his class. He would always tell me I'm welcome back. So I would go back. And I did this for about 7 years, from 2002 to 2009. In 2009, my brother and I were both locked up in ASEG for trafficking, conspiracy to traffic narcotics at San Quentin State Prison. My brother took all the charges. And I was sitting at ASEG, and not being a religious person, I'm not religious, but I meditated and I sat and I talked to my higher power all the time, right? And I used to always tell my higher power, if I get out of this one, I'm done. I'm just gonna quit. I'm done. I'm gonna quit everything. And one day I went to a hearing and they said, Moss, we find you not guilty. And I just couldn't believe it. So I went back to my cell and I asked the officer when he was uncuffing me and putting me back in that cell, I said, did they say not guilty? And he said, that's what I heard him say, Moss. I said, wow. So I went in the cell and I really started thinking, like, I'm getting ready to go back out here again. And do I really want all this madness back in my life? Or was I really serious about giving it all up, right? So I went back and I stopped. I stopped all the madness, all the drug dealing, breaking the rules. I never received another write-up in prison after that. Couple of years later, this GRIP program came about. Jacques started this new program called GRIP. And GRIP, the acronym, like Nina said earlier, was Guide Rage into Power. And I was fortunate enough to be one of the first participants in the GRIP class. So I went through the curriculum for a year. It was 52 weeks and we showed up every week. And I did this curriculum and I started to really, and earlier I told you I wasn't a big fan of the meditation and the mindfulness and the emotional intelligence. And, I started to really listen and I started to internalize what was being said and what was being done in the classroom. And I started to buy in and I started to really believe in this, right? So at the end of at the conclusion, we had this big celebration and graduation, and they told us all we're peacemakers, right? I said, a peacemaker, yeah, okay, I like that. I like the sound of that, right? So I graduated and I figured, all right, I'm done. I did 52 weeks of this. It's over with. I don't have to. That was 2012 graduation. It's over. And a couple of guys who were my facilitators came and asked me would I like to be trained to be a facilitator, to facilitate future GRIP classes. And, at that time I had never facilitated any classes or anything. I was like, yeah, I'll try it, So they started training me to be a facilitator and I started showing up for other tribes. And, I started liking it. It started just to be, to me, it was like being fed. It was just it filled me up, right? So I was able to be present for other people, and people would come talk to me and ask me, and I was like, "Are you sure you want to ask me for advice?" And and how I feel about things, and they were like, "Yeah, yeah." And I'm like, "Okay." So it started to be like, "Okay, this might really be working." And I remember earlier I told you I figured I was never getting out of prison. Well, 2016, I had a hearing with the Board of Parole Hearings here in California at San Quentin Prison. And I walked in the room and the commissioners talked to me and I had my hearing. And at the conclusion of the hearing, they told me that, "Mr. Moss, we no longer find you to be a threat to society, and we find you suitable for parole." And I was like, wow, right? Like, this is really big. I'm going home. And that was it. I'm like, 2016, 28 years in prison, I'm going home, right? Um, I got out in June. I went that hearing in April. June, they came to my door to let me come home. My wife met me in the parking lot, picked me up, and I went home. Got out, started working construction for a few years. I did a few speaking engagements for a grip, and I got a call in 2019, and they asked me would I like to fill out clearance papers to do some contract work to be a facilitator. I'm like, yeah, yeah, sure. So I did that, and yeah, I mean, it was so fulfilling, right? And being able to go back in and sit in a circle once again after 3 years of being in prison, being able to be back in that circle, right? And it just felt so comfortable. And I sat there and I was like, I'm back home, right? I love being out of prison, but then I found myself loving going back inside prison. So after a few months, they hired me as full-time staff, as a staff facilitator. And I'm like, okay. And I quit working construction, and this became my full-time job. And went from being a facilitator, and then I became our reentry coordinator. So I became the reentry coordinator while facilitating. I'm like, this is so powerful. I'm loving this, right? And after about a year and a half, I got another promotion and I became our senior facilitator, right? And I'm like, oh, this is like my career. I never thought I would have a career, right? And now this is my career path, and I'm loving it. And I get to go back. And we just started our first cohort in the women's prison. And I have the honor of going in and working with the women at Chowchilla. And I get to go to Mill Creek, and I get to go back into San Quentin every Wednesday. And it's just so fulfilling and so joyful. And this is my life's work, right? And I wouldn't do anything else. I mean, they can offer me a job tomorrow, making 300, $400,000 a year, and I would turn it down because I wouldn't be able to go in and be of service to other human beings the way I am with the GRIP program, and going inside the prisons and going in and all of the people that I left behind, right? Go back in just to be able to be of service to them. I'm so blessed. I even get a chance this Tuesday morning. I'm going to pick up one of the guys who just graduated our last class. He and I started out doing our time together in the early 90s at Folsom State Prison. He's coming home Wednesday. He just graduated the class with me, Nina, and Shakur. And I'm going up there. I'll be at the prison at 7 o'clock in the morning to pick him up. So, it's just so many blessings that come with doing this work and doing this job. And I'm just so filled and I'm so happy. And yeah, so, that's part of my story. It's part of who I am today, and what GRIP has done in my life. I work for wonderful people. My executive director, Miss Kim Moore, she is more than a director. She's a teacher. She's a friend. She's family, and she teaches me so much. And I just look forward to working with her for the next 10 to 15 years if possible. And, Jack Z and all my co-workers like Nina and Shakur and the many others. I just have, we all call ourselves family. We don't even call each other co-workers. That's the environment that we work in. So yeah, I love it. And yeah, it's not much more I can say right now, but yeah, I'm going to cut myself off right there and just stop. I think I talked enough. But yeah, just thank you all for taking time to listen to me. I appreciate you all. And I'm going to hand the mic over to Shakur. So thank you.
You're muted, Shakur.
Yes, I was unmuting myself. Can you hear me now? All right. Well, thank you, Bernard. You know, Bernard, that's my guy right there. You know, I got a lot of love and a lot of respect for Bernard Moss, that's for sure. Well, I'll start off by saying I got out of prison April 27th of last year after serving 36 and a half years. So I've been out for a little over a month. I say for me, my journey began back in 1966 in South Central Los Angeles. I was born. I later had 4 other siblings. I'm the middle of 5, the third child. My father was a Baptist minister and my mother a nurse. My father, I think it's important in terms of telling my narrative to give you an understanding of who I am and my background. It's really important to show where I come from so you can get an understanding. I had an opportunity to do, over the years, a lot of work in terms of going back, looking at my family history, my ancestral history, negative parental traits. I've done a lot of work within the last, I would say 11 to 12 years, really intense work. And in that process, I discovered some things. I think it's really important to be able to look at the family dynamics in order to understand how I was impacted and affected as a child. And in doing so, I'll start with my father. My father was born in 1914 in Mississippi. I would say he wasn't home most of the time. He was often going out, ministering at some church. My father was a World War II veteran. He was captured and tortured. I learned that about him after his demise in 1997 of cancer. And another interesting thing is that my father lost 3 wives and 3 sons. The first wife and son he lost while she was giving birth. The second wife and son he lost was in a car accident. And the third wife and son he lost was killed in retaliation for a gang-related murder that I committed on September the 7th, 1985, in South Central Los Angeles. My mother was born in 1931 in Linden, Alabama. My mother's mother passed away when she was young. I found this out through one of my cousins, Angela Y. Davis. She came to visit me while I was in prison in 2016, and she told me that my mother was her favorite cousin. My mother was older than her, and she often would like babysit her, watch over her in Angela's family home. She told me that when my mother's mother died, my grandmother, Daisy Lee Kimbrell Davis, that my mother made an attempt to jump inside the grave with her mother. And Angela said she had never seen anything like that before or since, the display of emotion. Afterwards, my mother she lived with her father on a farm in Alabama. I think it's important to point this out because my mother, I think she was experiencing things that I had no idea about. And also being raised on a farm with her father, I can see how that may have impacted her life. I think it's important for me to say that because I understand in certain times in my life, I believe that I experienced forms of emotional neglect from both of my parents. And I had to process this to come to this understanding because for me, it's not about blaming or pointing the finger. It's simply about being able to list the facts and understand and make some sense out of my life, to understand who I was and what motivated me to do the things I did, how I am the person I am today. So oftentimes as a little kid, there would be times when my mother would be in her room and she would be like reading a paper or reading a book or something. And I'm just a little child coming in, seeking attention or whatever. And I would get an angry, animated response. Boy, you're getting on my nerves. And that would cause me to cringe on the inside, making me feel unloved, even though this is the woman I know who loves me. She shows me affection, but I couldn't resolve that as a young kid, feeling that way when my mother would lash out at me in that manner. My father, being the Baptist minister that he was and being raised from the South, he comes from that old school religion: spare the rod, spoil the child. So my parents had expectations for me as a kid to follow my father's footsteps. So I didn't have a choice in the matter, but I had to attend church services, choir practice, sing solos before the opening of my father's sermon. My sister would play the piano. And as a kid, there would be times when I was doing church service, I would go outside and play in a parking lot. But when I got home, I would get these harsh whippings. And it made no sense for me to feel like I'm getting beat for playing like a child. So I began to grow a lot of resentment for my father. Another thing with that, in terms of church activities, it conflicted with the things that I wanted to do: play football, take karate. Eventually, I was able to do those things later on as I became, I took karate, for instance. I took karate, but I wasn't supported in those endeavors. And I couldn't attend the tournaments because they occurred on weekends, which means I had to go to church or choir practice. So I couldn't really, showcase my talents in the way that I wanted. And then later on, when I was 13, I was allowed to play Pop Warner football. And at that time, which I'll get to, I was at a crossroad in my life, and I eventually joined the gang at age 13. So I think it's important for me just to share that with you so you can have an understanding of my family background. When I was 6 years old, on my way to school, I was sexually molested. I was kidnapped by a stranger and taken to a gas station bathroom. And I managed to run away. I didn't know where I was. I just knew the general direction I came from. So I ran in the opposite direction, and I found myself on a busy intersection, and I ended up going to school. And I didn't tell anyone about that experience. Soon thereafter, I began fighting in school, having problems in school. I definitely didn't go back and tell my parents about what happened because, in my mind, I did something bad, and I definitely would get whipped for that. So I just went through life, just, angry. The ages of 8 and 9, I was sexually molested by an extended family member. And when I was 12, I was sexually molested by a neighbor. When I was 10 years old, my sister was drugged, PCP, and as a result of that, she was never the same since. She was drugged and taken advantage of, and as a result of that, she was never the same, and she ended up being in a mental hospital for the rest of her life, and she passed away last year. My older sister, Denise. When I was 11 years old, my older brother, Lehman, who goes by Raheem now, he was 7 years older than me. He was 18 years old. He was jumped on by gang members who knocked his teeth out with a baseball bat. And my parents moved him to stay with relatives in a southern state, actually with the Davises. That was really devastating for me because I shared a room with my older brother. And my older brother, he was like the image of what a man was. He was the guy who was keeping me tough and keeping me in line, so to speak. But I didn't understand when my brother, he was out of my life because he was attacked by some gang members, and I didn't know what was going on at that time. He was just no longer in my life, and I knew what happened. So a lot of anger and resentment towards gangs. When I was 13 years old, on my way home from junior high school, I was approached by 3 gang members who was harassing me about being in a gang. I'm not in the gang. They attacked me, took my tacos, I ran, and thereafter, I joined the gang, 13 years old. I wanted revenge, I wanted retaliation. My life spiraled out of control. I ended up running away from home. And I'll tell you that I was in and out of juvenile halls, plural. I ended up going to camp for a robbery I didn't commit. And I did a 1 year in camp, and when I got out of camp, I actually fired shots at the person who testified against me, saying that I had robbed them, which sent me to camp. So I went to youth authority for assault with a deadly weapon. And I did approximately 3 years there, and I paroled in April of 1984. I can say that no rehabilitation in any shape, form, happened during that time. Yeah, I managed to get my high school diploma. I managed to get a degree in landscaping, but that was just a place where there were just a lot of juvenile delinquents. And at that stage in my life, I had was cloaked in toxic masculinity. I was kicked out of 7 different junior high schools for things like gambling, getting smart with the teacher, leaving school without permission, leaving campus without permission, gang activity, being threatened by other gang members, before being kicked out of Los Angeles Unified School District altogether and sent to an all-boys school in East Los Angeles, Jackson High. And then 1 month later, I went to camp. When I got out of youth authority in 1984, I was so angry. I hadn't processed anything. And oftentimes, the environment, let me just express to you the environment I grew up in. I would come out of my house, look at every car that drove down the street. wondering if they were going to pull a gun out or if they were going to jump out of their car. I would look around every corner, every tree. And living like that, as a gang member, I would have a weapon. Let me say that all the things that I experienced as a child, the various sexual traumas, physical trauma, gang trauma. As a teenager, early teenager, with other young men, delinquents, who were experiencing pretty much the same trauma that I was experiencing, were leased on the community, and we pretty much committed the same crimes that happened to me. I committed in my neighborhood, in my community, with gang members. So, no unresolved issues. And I'll tell you, in that experience, as a gang member, subculture is very violent, it's uncaring, it's unempathetic. I unleashed on my community so much anger and rage. I feel so horrible for that. In 1985, after I was arrested for murder, and when my mother and little brother were killed, 4 days, the murder I committed happened on September the 7th, 1985, when I was approached inside a liquor store on Florence and Normandy by two rival gang members. I left outside the liquor store, and when one of the rivals gang members came outside the liquor store, after retrieving a weapon from my car, I shot him 5 times. When I was first arrested, the lie I had been telling for decades were that I was approached by 2 rival gang members in a liquor store. One of them followed me outside and withdrew a handgun. A struggle pursued for possession of the weapon, that I managed to get the weapon from him and shot him. That was a lie. That was my legal defense. It was something I've been telling friends and family for years, up until actually 2012. Needless to say, when my mother and little brother were killed, I was filled with so much anger, rage, depression, sadness. And if I wasn't arrested 4 days after that had happened, there's no telling what would have happened in the streets of South Central Los Angeles. So it was a mercy and a blessing for me to be taken off the streets. When I was in the holding tank, after my arrest, I decided that since my mother and little brother had died for me, that I was going to live for them. And that meant that I had to be the best person I could be. And the only way that I knew that I can do that was to be strong mentally, physically, and spiritually. And in order to cement that in my mind, I began exercising. I did 300 push-ups that day, and I began exercising for the rest of my life. I committed myself to exercising in honor of my mother and little brother. And that's something that I've been doing ever since. Even then, I wanted to change, but I really didn't know how. A couple of months later, I was charged with additional offenses for sexually assaulting 3 women and a teenage girl. I was lying, in denial, saying that it was misidentification, LAPD trumped up charges against me, they were railroading me. That was a lie that I had been telling everyone, my friends and family. In 1992, I started attending Islamic services. And what attracted me there was a young man who was a couple of years older than me. He was about 20 years old. And he was delivering the khutbah, the sermon. And he just had like a fire about himself that just resonated with me. He was very articulate, and it was like, that attracted me. And he also had these clerical skills, and the way he carried himself, I really admired. So I started attending Islamic services. In Ramadan, I began fasting. But I was like, I'm not, Islam was foreign to me. I'm not no Muslim. I would say in 2001, I took my Shahada and accepted Islam into my life. I still hadn't addressed the issues around my trauma, around my offending. In 2012, like I was trying to get to San Quentin, like I'm the opposite of Bernard. I was trying to get there. I heard about the program, but anybody couldn't they were often closed to intake. Every year you would go to an annual and you can put up a request to transfer. And so I put up a request for 2 years, and each year I was denied. But I saw a flyer from Patton University, and Patton University is a college program. They're now Mount Tam University at San Quentin, where they have like these professors come in who teach us, right? On site learning. So I was accepted by the college program, and I ended up going to San Quentin in 2012. And when I got there, it was totally a culture shock. It's like, what was in the water? You had these men, in blue, like standing up, speaking in these groups, being like super insightful into themselves, super articulate. And I'm like, whatever it is they've got, I want some of it. So I was able to see what change looked like. My cousin, Fania Davis, would come into San Quentin, and she was doing a mediation between Erica Huggins and Watani. Erica Huggins is the wife of a young man who was killed in UCLA. He was a Black Panther who was killed by another organization. And Watani was the person who was convicted of that. And anyway, Fania would come into the prison, and when I got to San Quentin, the person they put me in the cell told me that she came in, and so I was curious. She told me that she came into the restorative justice program. I hadn't known anything about restorative justice. And so I had heard that they were going to have a symposium. I got there in June of 2012. In August, they were having a symposium. August the 3rd, they were having a symposium on restorative justice. So I was having this dissonance in my mind, like, yeah, I want to go, but no, I don't want to talk about, I don't want to talk about crimes. I don't want to talk about victimization or anything like that. So I went to the yard. The symposium was from 9 to 3. I came back in at about 11 and I showered, and at noon, I decided that I was going to go. The symposium was being held in the Catholic chapel. So I walked up the center of the aisle, and they were already into breakout circles in the pews using fold-up chairs to create circles. So I sat in one of the pews, and one of the inside facilitators, Coach, who I'm sure Bernard knows, invited me inside the circle. And there, as soon as I sat in the circle, they gave me this talking piece. And I didn't know what to do with this. They told me I could pass, so I passed it. And by the time the talking piece made its way back around to me, I was open and honest about the crimes that I committed for the first time in 27 years. It was just something about the sacredness. It was something about the purity of the circle that spoke to me. And then after that, after I shared my experience, it was the looks of empathy and compassion from 3 of the women who were in my circle, as opposed to the looks of judgment that had an impact on me. Looks. Thereafter, I started attending weekly sessions of Restorative Justice Roundtable. And in October of that year, I was trained by one of the women who were in the circle, Sonia Shaw, as a circle process keeper. I was trained many other times after that, and thereafter, I got involved in a number of different groups over the years. Chairman of Criminal and Gang Members Anonymous, a BOG facilitator, Victim Offenders Educated Group, Elite, which was a leadership group, the chairman of, Kit Kat, event planner for an organization for young men who committed our crimes as juveniles, peer health educator, peer literacy mentor, class valedictorian 2019, Patton University. I helped launch the radio program in 2012, KLW in Cross Currents. And that radio program metamorphosed into Ear Hustle. I was episode 2 on Ear Hustle in 2015. And in 2018, Uncuffed. I am a co-producer of Uncuffed. So in 2012, I couldn't take the GRIP program because I was committed to getting my associate's degree. When it started, I had an end because one of the guys who was like instrumental in like doing paperwork, PJ, they invited me into the first class, but I wasn't able to take it. But I got an opportunity to know Jacques. And me and Jacques hit off right away. I took the GRIP class in 2014. And the tribe I was in, 662, Bernard was a facilitator. And as Nina mentioned, we're a 52-week program, once a week. We were afforded the opportunity to capture the entire 52 weeks on video. And I was raw in terms of my growth and development and details. So I shared on camera details. They asked, because of the nature, the nature of my crimes as far as sexual assault, oftentimes men inside of prison are often targeted and attacked. But Jacques, he gave me an opportunity to turn the corners off, the cameras off. But I expressed to him that if what I can say can help other people, then keep them rolling. So I was accountable on those on film. And now they use one of the trailers for an orientation that I share, and 2 other men. They use it whenever we do an orientation, like Nina had talked about or mentioned earlier. When we tell them what GRIP is about, we also show the orientation video before we interview them. I'll say that GRIP and Jacques, you know how some people, it's just something about them that's so unique. they just have something about them that attracts everyone to them. That's Jacques Verduin. Jacques Verduin also, after we did the video, he ran Fanya. He had saw Fanya and he had shared with, we went to a conference and he had shown a video and Fanya had saw the video. And yeah, and thereafter, Fanya started coming to visit me inside the prison. I facilitated a number of different tribes of GRIP before getting out. And as Nina mentioned, I was a part of the tribe that her first tribe, her and Bernard, as the outside facilitator, I was an inside facilitator. So when I paroled in April, I got out, GRIP Kim, she came through and gave me a stipend and told me that they would take me on as an intern. And so I was doing intern work in the office of GRIP. And then I went into a greenhouse fellowship, what I'm in right now, and I did a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to show my worth and value to the organization. So this week, I'll be interviewing for my full-time position. I started going back into San Quentin. I wasn't even out. 6 months, started going back into San Quentin with Nina and Bernard. And I also went into another tribe with another colleague named Fatim, formerly incarcerated, on Wednesdays. So I did 2 GRIP tribes on Wednesday. And matter of fact, I just came back yesterday from going to Soledad Prison. I'm a brown card holder in Soledad, so I can actually escort people in Soledad Prison. I'm 1 year gate cleared for San Quentin. And as Bernard said, it is such a rewarding experience. It's like we feed off each other. It's a reset. I would tell you that since I've been out, there are so many things that have been taking place in my life. There's no doubt in my mind that the ancestors, that spiritual entity, Allah, is watching over me in so many ways. There's so many things that are taking place in my life, so many opportunities at an employment. I work for a number of different organizations. RJOY, Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth, I hold a formerly incarcerated circle on Mondays. Uncuffed, I teach formerly incarcerated students on Saturdays when I'm not down in Soledad, on podcasting, 12-week workshop, 3 cohorts, 4 participants in each workshop. They get $125 stipend each workshop. So that feels good. Yeah, so I'm just in a great place in my life. I went to Norway. I wasn't out a month. And I went to Norway with my colleagues from UNCUF. I attended a international prison radio conference, and I ended up going inside a couple of prisons in Norway, and I interviewed staff and incarcerated people. A couple of weeks ago, I was on NPR, 2 stories the same day. One 9 a.m. was an interview I did here and now about my trip to Norway and the governor's ideal to change San Quentin into a rehabilitative center model, a California model after the Norwegian way. And that was on 9 a.m. And 9 p.m., I did an interview on Throughline on apologies. So I had written an apology letter. And they did an entire episode on apologies. They talked about the Salem witch hunts and how the judges had apologized for putting people to death. They, talked about Bill Clinton and so on and so forth. Anyway, there's just been so much going on in my life. I can go on and on. Like I said, 20 minutes isn't enough. Right now, I'm in this is my apartment. I'm in a 2-bedroom apartment, 5-minute walk from the lake. I have a new car, a 2023 Kia. I have a gym membership. I exercise every morning. I wake up every morning. I'm grounding. I'm living a dream. And I'll just leave it right there.
Thank you, Shakur. Thank you for sharing all of that. Okay, so let's see here. Looking at the time, Bernard, should we do a short grounding?
I think we should do the announcements.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so actually, I want to take a collective poll of the group for a minute. Because of the time, I want to see, we'll do the announcements. I want to see if folks are ready for some time to ground, or if folks want to use the time for questions. So I'm just going to ask the collective, and then you can do your announcements, Syra. But after announcements, can I see hands of who would like just grounding, a little time to ground? Okay. Okay. So let's do that after the announcements. Okay.
Well, Nina, if we could do a short grounding and
Yeah.
break
Yeah.
up short, so we have more time to talk and have a discussion or questions or whatever.
Okay, great. Okay, so Syra, maybe we can do announcements a little bit quickly. And so then we'll do like a 5-minute grounding and have some time for questions.
Hi, wonderful. Wow. Just so, wow, so deep. So I'm just so honored to have our wonderful guests here this evening from GRIP. So thank you so much, Shakur and Bernard, for being here. In the chat, Johnny and I are going to post the website for GRIP. And if you are interested in learning more about GRIP and what they do, they are seeking volunteers. And so you can learn all about that on the website. And also, if you'd like to offer Donna, if you want to donate, you can do that directly through SFI this evening. And so we have a special, the usual Donna link, which should be in the chat. And there should be a drop-down menu, and you will see the option for GRIP there this evening. So you can offer, if you are so moved, if you can offer whatever you would like in support of this wonderful, wonderfully transformative program. I have a couple other things to announce just briefly, and that is in regard to our San Francisco Insight Dharma Center, which is our collective of sits and sanghas in San Francisco that are coming together with the intention of forming a center. And so we have recently launched our website, and we're really launching our community and gathering support around this vision and this intention. And so one of the first things that we are doing as a collective is a in-person all Sangha community event. And so that event is June 17th. It's a Saturday. It's in San Francisco at St. John's the Episcopal's, or I'm sorry, St. John the Evangelist. And all of that information will also be in the chat. You can go directly to the event link there. You can also go to the Insight Dharma Center website and find out more about what it is and what we are up to there. And I want to encourage folks, if you're interested, to volunteer with the IDC. And this can be for the upcoming event or anything that that you are interested in. We have a form that you can fill out. Very easy. You can click the link there. It's in the chat. And one other thing, if you do go to the website, the Insight Dharma Center website, and you want to stay updated as to what's going on, you can sign up for the updates, the newsletter there. That is it. I'll hand it back to Nina. Thank you so much, everybody. Mwah.
Thank you for the kiss, Syra. Okay, Bernard, how about you ground us for 5 minutes and then we'll have time for some questions.
All right, that sounds great. I would like to invite those of you who would like to turn off your cameras, to turn off your camera. I'm going to turn mine off and just leave my microphone on. And just kind of clear our minds for a little while. And I'd like for you to find a posture that's comfortable for you. Find somewhere to sit in your seat that's comfortable, feet firmly on the ground. If you like to stand, you can stand. And let's just imagine a glass of water. And I'm just going to put some mud in that water, some dirt, and shake it up and let it get all dirty. And we're going to imagine that jar of water is our minds. And as that dirt starts to settle, that water starts to get clear. So I'm going to ask you to invite you to take 3 deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. And then I'm just going to ask you to naturally connect with your breath. Feel any sensations that accompany that. If you notice any sounds around you, just let it be that sounds. If anyone's intentionally being loud around you, just let it be that, them being loud. And as you sit, if you notice yourself becoming to be triggered or angry or irritated, just let it go and come back to your breath. Just notice your breath and pay attention and connect. As we inhale, notice our rib cage expand. Just watch it fall as we exhale. Concentrate on the feeling of our belly expanding as we inhale. It falls as we exhale. Let your breath be your anchor. Being present in this moment. Every time you notice that your mind has wandered, come back home to this feeling, to this moment, here and now, over and over, without judgment. And I invite you to take 3 more deep breaths. And as you feel moved, I invite you to turn your cameras back on and open your eyes and to join us back in this Zoom call.
Thank you, Bernard. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
That felt
Thank
good.
you.
I needed that. Yeah. So we have just over 10 minutes. And I really want to open it up to questions or reflections or comments, conversation to the Sangha. And I think you can feel free to ask anything really of any of us. Michelle?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. The first time I met my father, it was at Chino Men's Correctional Facility, and you guys have given me a little bit more of a picture of what things are like and the human behind the number. And the numbers that you guys are sharing that your tribes are called, it was hard to hear those numbers. It's big, like it feels emotional. That's just too many years. So you've given me a lot to think about, and I really appreciate your time here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Michelle. Okay, Barry.
Yeah, thank you. I'm curious about what happens during the 52 weeks. Are most of the meetings similar? Is there kind of a trajectory that you follow? Yeah, I'd love to know more about it.
So we have a curriculum that covers 52 weeks, and it's broken into 4 different sections. The first section is stopping our violence and doing no harm. And then we go into learning emotional intelligence. And then there's cultivating mindfulness. And then the last part of it is understanding victim impact. And there's homework assignments, there's essays that they have to write. There's a bunch of work, a deep emotional work that goes into these 52 weeks of programming.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Each class is very different, Barry. There are certain things that we do each class, like a grounding at the beginning, some other things, but I'll pass it to Syra.
Thank you. Yes. Questions for you. Both of you, your stories are so impactful, so powerful, and really speak to it's the power of that composting, where life will kind of put us, it's like the coolest point in the furnace. We move toward that direction. It's like being in this vice, and all that we can do is as Shakur was saying, he just wanted to better himself, just wanted to make this transformation. Began with exercising, didn't know what else to do, didn't know how else to change. But there's this powerful transformation that is moving through. The two of you, and I'm sure others in this program. I'm curious because it's easier said than done. What parts of the program supported you the most? Because this is real rage being transformed. How did this happen?
Well, first off, I want to say so there's so many aspects of the curriculum that touch my life and has impacted me in terms of my transformation. But one thing in particular, when I think about grief, the grieving program was good for me because it allowed me to go back and look at different parts of my life, different parts of my childhood, to grieve a childhood, to grieve an uncle dying when I was young, so on, to grieve things like has allowed me to heal. One thing that I didn't mention, which behooves me to mention, so you can have a full, complete story, is that in 2018, on January the 1st, my son was killed by police. He ran, they tackled him and they tasered him, and he died as a result in Los Angeles. And so the grieving aspect of grief has given me an opportunity to process my thoughts, my feelings, and my emotions around that process. It allows me to come to terms, with what has happened in my life.
I was going to say for myself, I've taken a lot of groups in prison, but I think GRIP was the first group that told me that they couldn't make me a better person because there's nothing wrong with me in the first place. They were just going to show me how to go back to being my true, authentic self. And that was so big, that stood out for me. And that's how I live today, as my true, authentic self.
Mm. Yeah.
I think Lloyd has his hand up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go for it, Lloyd.
Thank you, all three, for your very inspirational evening. I'm not sure how I can ask this question, but I guess what I want to say is that in 1972, so my mother-in-law was killed, and my wife and I ended up in the hospital as a result of an angry man. And so, we went through the process, and I guess he ended up doing time. But I mean, hearing your story and then hearing GRIP, but what happens before GRIP? I mean, what happens before? What happens to these angry folks? How do we live in a world where, I mean, maybe, social injustice and all that, but then at some point when people become so angry and so irresponsible in their actions, like my family, I mean, we suffered for that. And I don't, and I, and hearing Shakur's story, before, as a young man, you were angry and you wreaked havoc. How do we live? I mean, I guess my question to you, Shakur, is before you had your transformation, what would be the right thing at that point before you had opened up your heart?
Be the right thing prior to me being violent?
Yeah. So while you were still in your violent stage, while you were still angry and out causing havoc, where did you need to be? What was the place? Where do angry young men need to be to protect society? And how do we go about doing rehabilitation?
Got you. So one of the things I think is really important is that we need to have conversations. We need to be able to talk about, for one thing, we need to talk about sexual violence in society. We need to talk about these traumas because, like, and create opportunities for little boys like Tommy. When I was the 6-year-old boy, I didn't have anybody to talk to process what I had experienced. So just imagine if there had been some type of, I don't know, it could have been a person, it could have been a place, like even later in life, even as an older adolescent, just to have the ability to process the thoughts and the things that happen in my environment. Like, I didn't have an opportunity to process anything. For me, those things became normalized. So it wasn't a matter of, it wasn't like you talk about remorse, like after getting beyond a certain part, it's like I didn't know what remorse meant. I didn't know what empathy meant, right? But the thing is, when something so tragic happened in my life, it allowed me to look back on the things that I had done to so many people, all the harm that I had caused. And that's where I began to feel and experience empathy and realize that I didn't want to be violent anymore. And you want to know something? After I stopped being violent, violence was no longer in my life. I was no longer attacked while I was in prison. I was in some of the most violent prisons, from Pelican Bay, Calipatra, Folsom, all of them.
But when you were in that violent phase, was prison the right place for you to be? Is that where you should have been?
In that violent state, yes. Right after, at that stage, Yes. Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, I want to add to this too. And first of all, Lloyd, I want to say I'm sorry that you and your family went through that. I really am. But I also want to say hurt people hurt people,
Right.
right? And that's one of the things that I've learned throughout my journey and throughout doing this work, right? And heal people heal people.
Right.
And we have so many hurt young people in this world, and they don't know where to turn to for help. They don't understand that there are programs like this program available to them, right? And then society makes it so hard for programs like this to reach our young people. Myself, I've tried to work with youth in our schools, in our high schools, and our junior high schools. They don't want to let formerly incarcerated people on campuses, right? So how do we reach people that they'll listen to? You know, it's one thing for someone who's gone to college and read books to go in, who can't relate, that these young people don't relate to, come in to talk to them. But then the people who they do relate to, who have done the work, who have changed their life, and who want to relay that message to them, they're not accessible to them unless they're a family member or somebody that they know personally, because society no longer lets us have access to them, right? So somewhere the barrier and the bridge needs to be, the gap needs to be filled, where we can help these young hurt people stop hurting people, and they can be healed before they end up in prison, because it's not necessary for young people to have to go to prison to be healed. Me and Shakur shouldn't have had to go to prison for 28 and 35 years to find our healing space, right? We should have been able to find that before sitting in a cage for all of those years.
Thank you.
You.
I see the questions and I'm looking at the time. So I want to make a call here by starting to ask Bernard and Shakur if you're willing to stay a little more. And then folks who have joined, it is 7:30. So if you want to sign off, we completely understand. And if folks want to stay and ask a few more questions, are you both good with that, Bernard, Shakur?
Yes.
Okay.
I also want to say before we go, I just want to say that anyone leaving, like, if you want to ask me some questions, you can contact me at shakurinsideout@insideout.org.
Yeah, if you send an email through the volunteer link at SFI, I'll get that email and I can share Shakur's email address since you just generously offered that. And so let's hold a little more space here. Just this is a precious opportunity for questions. So Eugene or Pam.
Hi, everybody. Really what I want to say is thank you, and say this for the whole group. Thank you for coming here and speaking here. And I want to invite you to come back, because there's more to say and more to talk and more discussion that I think will be really, really helpful. And I believe this is the kind of program like GRIP and all the different programs you're involved with. I think it's what's needed in our society for all of us. And I'm really just thankful. Thank you. Thank you to Nina for being involved. And I was just at a benefit program last week for GRIP. And, you know, I've known Jacques for 30 years, and he's been here in the old days. He was here. And I'm old enough to have some old days. So I'm so happy this is happening. And what I would like is to invite you, and I'll look at the calendar and talk to Nina and invite you back on one of my nights when we're teaching, and see how else we can keep. Pardon?
Support.
And not just support, but learn together about what's needed to change our world together. So just my thank you, all blessings. I'm giving you all the Buddhist blessings. I'm a minister and all that stuff. So I'm giving you a lot of love, really. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eugene, why don't you dedicate the merit? And Bernard and Shakur might not know that Eugene and Pam are our guiding teachers here at San Francisco Insight. You might have just figured that out.
Beautiful.
If you don't know, get it, please. I'm the cool guy.
They're rock stars too.
But 60s rock. Okay. So really appreciating the time and place and Sangha that we have together, that we could be here in this way to be real together and talk about what's really needed so we can heal ourselves and our communities and the world. And may this kind of good fortune get spread every which way, above, below, to the, west, east, south, north. May all beings feel the goodness and love that we all feel being here together and being real together. So, and may all beings awaken. May we awaken together. May all beings be free everywhere. And I don't have a bell here, Nina, so you have to do the bell.
Ding, we say ding.
Yeah, my bell's over there, so ding,
Ding.
ding.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there. Michelle's expressing it.
There's the hearts for you, since we don't do that. This was fire. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
We can't wait to have you back. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all. Appreciate everybody. Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah.
it's an honor, truly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.